There's been a lot of debate on the iPad Pro between which is really better, the 11-inch or the 12.9. I've watched a ton of that kind of content myself, and I find that a lot of times there's hedging or there's people that just list features and then ask the audience to decide, or people just are dismissive saying, it's whatever one you like. And in several threads, I've seen people say something to the effect of, I wish somebody would just take a definitive stand and then make a case for it. So I've been giving that some thought and decided, all right, I'll take a shot at it. As somebody who's owned both over the last couple of years, and the reason why, when I had to make a choice, instead of having both of them, I ended up going with the 12.9. This is not me saying that anybody who prefers the 11-inch is doing it wrong. It's just my experience, my opinion. But to me, there are some clear differences between the two of them that when you're thinking iPad Pro as a distinction from all the other iPads, there are some real reasons that only the larger one makes sense. So here we go. To me, obviously, you have to go into this knowing both iPads have the same processor, both have the same RAM, and they have the same storage options, so it doesn't matter there which size you pick in terms of the screen. There's no competitive advantage on those, but the few differences there are end up being really significant. Starting with the 11-inch screen. That's basically the same as the 10.9-inch iPad Air and the same as the regular iPad. The resolution, their standard Retina display for the iPad, pretty much the same. Now that's not knocking the resolution. It's sharp, it looks nice, it has good detail, and the contrast is pretty good. It's one of the better screens in a tablet that you see on the market. But the 11-inch iPad Pro isn't offering you, in terms of the screen, anything different than what you're going to get with the iPad Air or the other iPads, other than that 120 Hz refresh rate for slightly more fluid flipping and motion. That's not nothing, but I don't think most of the time people are really going to notice that as much as they would notice greater contrast, greater color vibrancy, or greater resolution, and it doesn't offer those things. The 12.9, on the other hand, does. You're getting an HDR screen, which if you do any kind of movies, you do photo editing, you do video work, you're even looking at high contrast screens a lot, say a black background with white text a lot, it really makes a difference. When I had both of the size iPads and I would alternate between them each day, every time I got back on the bigger one, I was like, wow, this just feels way more luxurious. Both because of all of that extra screen real estate, but also just the sheer contrast and the way that the colors are so vibrant, especially when I was looking at photos that I took of outdoors and things on this, it just really made me appreciate my own art in a way that I couldn't on the other iPad. And because no other iPad other than this one offers this screen size or that HDR type of color richness, every time you use this, it gives you that feeling of, yes, I'm using an iPad Pro because this is a thing that no other iPad will give me. On the 11-inch, you don't really get that feeling because you're using pretty much the same screen as all of the other iPads. Okay, so let's talk speakers now. Both types of iPad Pros come with quad speakers, meaning instead of just two, one on each side, they come with two on each side. I don't really feel that that makes as big of a difference on the 11-inch. I have an old iPad Air from a few years back, and we compared it to the 11-inch iPad Pro when I had tried it. There's a little bit of an increase in volume, but I don't think there's an increase in clarity, and the bass, the richness of the tone of the output, not really different to my ear than the iPad Air. And so once again, it's not a meaningful difference between the two. Whereas on this larger iPad Pro, the 12.9, I don't know if it's the internal chassis space being bigger that from a resonance standpoint helps the speakers, or maybe they use different speakers altogether. I don't know. All I know is there is a difference in sound. They're noticeably louder, and there's a much more richness to the sound. In as far as you could say there's good bass in tiny tablet speakers, there's noticeably better bass out of this. The low end, much more robust. Other people have commented about that in reviews as well, and I just find that that's another way that you could look at the 12.9 and say, see, this is an iPad Pro. Here's a feature that you only get on this, and you're not going to experience on any other iPad. Now let's talk mobile screen keyboard. This isn't something that gets discussed a lot, but I feel that it's really important. When I started with this 2 years ago, when I first got the M1 iPad Pro, I got used to that screen keyboard. It's really nice. The keys are nicely spaced. It has a dedicated number row. As on-screen keyboards goes, it's one of the nicest that I've used. It's about as good an experience as you could get, I think, on an on-screen keyboard without switching to a physical Bluetooth keyboard, which is also something I do on a pretty regular basis with this. When I then tried the 11-inch iPad Pro, I was kind of dismayed. Like immediately when I was using that keyboard, I was like, oh, this is just a bigger version of the one you get on the iPhone or the iPad Air. It's not different. The keys are spaced a little bit more wonky, in my opinion, in a way that lowers my typing speed. You don't get a dedicated number row. It just doesn't feel as premium. And there's no option to say, I'm willing to lose more of the screen to the keyboard, make the keyboard bigger. Can't do it. And so for me, once again, that just becomes another, when you're using the 11-inch, it feels like using all of the other iPads. It doesn't give you anything different. When you use the larger one, you are getting an exclusive keyboard on the screen that comes with no other iPad, and only this one gives it to you. And like I said, I feel that keyboard is nicer to type on, so that's just another minor way that it gives you that premium feel. It makes you feel like you are indeed using the top-of-the-line iPad that's on the market, and only something you get with the larger size. But how do any of these things play in practical usage? All right, so at one point when I was comparing both of them, I basically started alternating days. Okay, today I'm going to exclusively use the 11-inch. Tomorrow I'm going to exclusively use the 12.9-inch. I'm going to use them for everything in my personal life, from YouTube videos, messages, reminders, the calendar, productivity widgets, to anything that I can do for work that day that makes sense to do on an iPad where I don't really need my MacBook Pro to do. I will do it on the iPad. And then I started jotting down, here are circumstances where I really felt that that particular iPad that day felt more comfortable, made more sense. And I alternated for a couple of weeks. I started looking at those lists, and they were very telling after a while. My list for the 11-inch of the things that I felt that it was a little more comfortable for were all non-pro things. Stuff like sitting back on a couch, one-arming it and reading an ebook or something, reading an article, maybe looking at my text messages, maybe checking my calendar to get caught up on some stuff, things like that. But ask yourself, do you need all the extra horsepower that an iPad Pro has to do any of those things? No, you don't. Any iPad can read an ebook, any iPad can browse the web, any iPad can go in your calendar and do basic things like that. It wasn't offering me any advantage in its size for things that you would say are pro usage in that case. So it felt a little overkill for those types of things. And I often thought to myself, yeah, you could take this iPad Pro away from me and just hand me a basic iPad, and I probably wouldn't notice the difference at all on doing any of those things. Then I looked at my list for the 12.9. What are all the things that one seemed better to me for? What are the things that every time I picked that one up again instead of the 11-inch, I thought to myself, yes, this is a better situation. Basically everything on that list were real pro power user type situations. If I was going to use it at a desk on a stand with a mouse and keyboard, I definitely always preferred the bigger 12.9. It was just a much better experience. The extra screen real estate made it feel much more consistent with my laptop. It didn't feel like a step down into a tablet. It just felt like a more mobile version of a computer that had all those features. And of course, that great screen is nice to look at all day when you're doing serious work. When I was photo editing, sometimes when I did video editing, even when I was doing web design work and writing on client sites, this was just more comfortable to do that. And so I began to look at my life and say, yeah, for every quote unquote pro thing that I ever would do with an iPad, the bigger one makes a heck of a lot more sense. And every single time when I tried to do any of those things on the 11-inch, it felt like I was making a concession. That to me is kind of the list of reasons where I'm like, if you're a person who really says the 12.9-inch is too damn big, I don't want it, you might be a person who would get away with just using the iPad Air, especially since the iPad Air now comes with the M1 chip in it. And I, as much as many other people, are of the opinion that the M2 versus the M1 performance difference is not really that noticeable. case in point to that, obviously I have a 2-year-old M1 12.9-inch iPad Pro. The 11-inch that I had was the newer M2. Even though it was supposedly faster, I ended up telling my wife that she could have it, and I stuck with my 2-year-old M1. To me, even in photo editing, even in web design work, and all of my pro things that I do with this, I did not notice a performance degradation stepping back down to the M1, and for me, having this big screen was a must. I looked at it another way, asking myself, long term, I'm not going to have both of these iPads. If I had to only have one, which one of them not having it anymore would I feel more? It was obvious to me I would feel not using this more, because every time I got on the screen, I'm like, it just feels so luxurious, so much more comfortable to do stuff on. So that's it. That's my take on it. That's my stand. You can let me know if you disagree or not in the comments. But if you are on the fence between the two sides and you're trying to decide which one might be better for you, hopefully that's a helpful perspective from somebody who does actual pro work as much as I can with the iPad. There are some things I still use the MacBook for, like video editing most of the time, some of the photo editing. But as much as I can, I use the iPad, and when I do, the 12.9 is just the way to go as far as I'm concerned. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.